This section of the course is dedicated to physical access control, something that we commonly call site security. Now, before we get into that, and before we start talking about physical security, I think it's important that we spend some time and just talk about the concept of access control from just a general perspective. So this lecture is going to be an overview of access control. We're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about the difference between physical and logical access control with some examples. And then we're also going to talk about the different types of access control. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. And this is probably going to be a bit on the lengthier side, just to forewarn you. So access control protects us against a wide variety of threats. So when we think about risk management and threats, the different types of things that it protects us against is, for example, unauthorized access, unapproved modification of our data, and a lack of data confidentiality. So if we go back to the CIA triad, we can see how this ties into that. Now let's talk about physical versus logical access control, and let's compare and contrast those. So physical access control or physical security includes implementing different access control measures with technology you can touch. So when I'm talking about technology you can touch, we're talking about security cameras, we're talking about locked doors, we're talking about fences and so forth. So anything that involves us physically locking down and securing our equipment or our building and property, that's going to tie into physical access control and physical security. Now on the flip side, logical access control or logical security methods include those elements that are implemented through technological means. So when we say technological means, we're talking about password policies, we're talking about logical access control lists, we're talking about file permissions and GPOs in our Windows Active Directory domain. So we're talking about stuff like that. Now let's talk about some example common physical access control measures. So again, this entire section is dedicated to physical access control and site security. So we're going to talk about a lot of these different things further as we go into the section, but I just wanted to list some of them off here. So employee ID badges, that's a really good one. Having an ID badge is a common way for people that work in your organization to identify you as an employee. Same thing for the security guards. Physical access logs, door access systems, proximity cards to get into secure areas, man traps, hardware locks on your doors, video surveillance throughout your property, security guards, building alarms, and fences. So these are all common physical access control measures. Now let's take a look at some logical access control measures. Access control lists. So access control lists on our devices, on our switches that are manageable, our routers, our servers, and so forth. NTSF permissions on our Windows machines, so proper file permissions. Windows group policies in place on our Active Directory domain. Effective password, account, and device policies in our systems and on our software. So those are some examples of logical access control, and we're going to be talking about logical access control later in the course. So now that you know what access control is, what physical access control and logical access control is, let's talk about the different categories, or we can call these types of access control. So they can be broken down into multiple different categories, and I'm just going to let you know right now what we're talking about here. This kind of goes beyond the scope of the certification, but this is going to help prepare you, and the more that you understand the different types, the more that you're going to understand how to implement access control measures both in physical access controls and logical access controls. So I think it's important that we spend 5 or 6 minutes and talk about these. So the different types, there's preventative, detective, corrective, recovery, deterrent, and compensating. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the first one, which are preventative access control measures. So these prevent actions. So for example, a background check for a potential employee or contractor before approving that they have access to something. And in this example, we say a tenant. So let's say that you are a building manager and a tenant wants to come in and rent some office space. Well, before you rent it out to them, you're going to want to do a background check to make sure that they're qualified to rent that space. Another example would be a drug test before hiring an employee, especially for a position where you want to make sure that they are of sound mind and body. So those are some examples of preventative controls. Let's take a look at the second one. The second one would be detective controls. So these are typically going to send off alerts during or after an attack. So an example would be a building alarm is triggered and goes off during or after a break-in. We can equate that to businesses and also in our homes. I mean, that's kind of a common thing for people to have building alarms, and they can either be a loud active one or they can be a silent one, or you could have some sort of a camera where it's going to alarm you on your cell phone or a device that you have. A network intrusion detection system that's going to be alerting the network administrators or the computer incident response team when there's an active attack on your network. So that's a detective control. The third one is a corrective control, which tries to correct a damaged system, network device, or some sort of a process. So a very simple example of this would be antivirus software. It can quarantine suspected malicious software, malware that's on your system, and it can quarantine it, and if need be, delete it and try to correct any damage that's been done to your system. An intrusion prevention system can make changes to your network, so it can not only stop the attack, but it can also make changes to prevent that from occurring in the future. So that's a corrective control. The next one is a recovery control. So controls that are needed to restore functionality. So a good example of that would be restoring corrupted data. Let's say on a server, maybe a server went down or server was damaged. There was some sort of loss of asset. Maybe it was stolen. Well, we have a data backup offsite. We can use that data backup and back up and restore that data that is corrupted, lost, missing, stolen. That's a very simple example of a recovery control. Secondary office sites. So for example, if we have our main office in an area that's prone to a natural disaster, then we might want to have a secondary site. And when we talk about those, there are things such as a cold site, a warm site, and a hot site that will allow us to resume our business operations after a natural disaster occurs if our primary business is no longer capable of doing so. And the next one is going to be a deterrent access control. So this deters potential users, and when we say users, malicious users, from performing actions. So let's say, for example, a really good example would be security guards. So security guards walking around in parking lots. You'll commonly see this around the holiday times in malls and so forth. That's going to deter somebody from trying to break into cars. A beware of dog sign at your house. That's going to deter a burglar from trying to rob your house. And then a fence around your building that deters people. It's going to make it harder for them to get into your building because they have to go over the fence, maybe through your parking lot where you have security guards and bright lights. All those are going to be deterrent controls. And then the last one that I want to talk about are compensating access controls. And what this is a means of adding additional security by compensating other controls' weaknesses. And we've already talked about this. This would be defense in depth with multiple layers of security. So rather than just having one security in place, one security measure in place, we're going to have multiple different security measures in place, and they're going to compensate weaknesses in others. And that's where physical and logical access control go hand in hand. We use the concept of defense in depth, and we use physical access control measures and logical access control measures, where physical access control measures are going to secure our physical assets and make it harder for people to physically get access to our servers, to our systems, to our network, to get access to our logical control measures. And then additionally, our logical control measures are going to protect it once somebody gets access to it. And they also protect people trying to get in from far, far away across the internet where they're trying to break into our network and our systems as well. So that's the concept of compensating access control measures. So that's our overview of access control. and I just wanted to make sure I spent some time talking about what it was from a high level, talking about the difference between physical and logical access control measures, and then talking about the different categories of access control measures before we jumped into and did our nitty-gritty look at physical access control. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. If not, thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next video. Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's video and you learned a lot from it. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and also consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Now, if you're interested in taking this full course or just learning more about it, check out the video description down below because I've included a link where you can learn more about the course and enroll into it if you'd like. So again, thanks for watching my video. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you guys at the next video. Take care.